tens of thousands of WestJet passengers are just anxiously waiting to see if their flights are going to take off as planned this weekend. The union representing its flight attendants, they've issued a 72-hour strike notice. The airline has responded with a 72-hour lockout notice of its own. And if these two sides don't reach a deal, workers could be on the picket lines as early as Sunday. CBC News caught up with some potentially affected Canadians at Toronto's Pearson Airport. Take a listen.
Convenience of flying and the luxuries that we have are really important, right? But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is like the workers. Like, you know, you have to be fair. I'm sure if there's a strike, there's a reason.
People got to strike. I believe in labor rights. So, you know what? It's a necessary evil, I think.
There's a festival I'm going to, so I'm going to ignore it until Sunday. I don't know if I would have booked with WestJet if I knew that this is what was happening.
So a lot at stake, especially for the travelers involved. And they've now, Michelle, issued these sort of dueling 72-hour notices. And I can never really get a read when this happens. Is this just kind of the high-stakes brinkmanship of that, or is it just part of the process? What's your read on where we are in this dispute?
Well, the fact that they chose a long weekend where, you know, I suspect that there's a lot more people traveling on WestJet than even on other summer weekends. You know, I think that, you know, I think we learned this from a similar dispute on Air Canada, that the public was really with the workers, right? It is only fair that you get paid for the hours that you're working. And so, you know, it was interesting that, you know, you're talking to those people who are all going to be impacted themselves, but, you know, it was clear where their support kind of rests. So, you know, I suspect that each side thinks the other will blink. But with public opinion, probably with the workers, I suspect they're the ones that are not going to.
Rachel, I don't know if you agree that public opinion is with the workers. It often is heading into it. It sometimes shifts once it actually comes into a dispute where they're losing out on their travel plans or whatever it is. Do you think the public can stomach an actual lockout or strike or disruption of service like this?
I think it's an interesting question, Peter, because we saw public opinion so strongly on the side of the flight attendants last time. The question is, I think it's a bit too early to figure it out this time, whether or not Canadians are still willing to put up with flight disruptions. But two things in this situation can both be true. One, that workers deserve pay for any hours that they work, and also that Canada deserves a healthy airline industry. And, you know, we've had so many issues in this country, a country that is vast, that is, air travel is such a critical part of our identity as Canadians, and yet we've seen such limited competition. We had a Competition Bureau talking about that this year as well. But last summer, the Conservatives, before the House rose, you might remember this, put out a bill, 409, the Fairness for Flight Attendants Act. That bill didn't pass, but it talked about a lot of these issues, things that you might not think that the Conservatives would put forward, having the labor code changed, when we typically might see Conservatives, you know, try and have that government intervention not included in these types of situations. But something like that, had Parliament passed that, would have directly impacted what we're seeing today. So I agree with Michelle. I think, you know, this long weekend, it's going to be very frustrating for travelers. But again, you know, the Air Canada flight attendants did an incredible job of getting that message out there last year and getting Canadians on side with their message. I feel that will translate into this strike, which hopefully will not last very long.
Andrea, you know, all eyes are really on the feds to see if they'll step in if this does go ahead. CUPE is explicitly calling on Ottawa to stay out of this and respect the process. How much pressure is there going to be on the feds to act if indeed we do find ourselves in a work disruption scenario?
Well, it's an interesting question. I suspect to be significantly less with it being WestJet than it being Air Canada, to be quite honest about it. I mean, WestJet is still largely a regional player. It doesn't have the same kind of international network. It's a different, you know, type of a carrier, more passenger oriented than necessarily also tied into the supply chains and cargo. So, you know, I think it's probably there'll be less pressure. It doesn't mean there won't be angry travelers if in fact it does move into a strike after the long weekend or somewhere on the return part of it. I do find it curious, though, that Air Canada has been successful even this year in reaching a number of other deals with their employees and the unions. And what is different that makes WestJet think somehow it can move beyond this or somehow hold back, the tides of what are clearly turning in terms of the aviation industry. We've seen for years in sector-based bargaining, certainly in the auto sector, that once one major employer reaches a deal with a group of employees, that usually translates across the sector. It's unclear whether there's different issues here at play with WestJet or a different business model, but it is really, I think, a bit curious that we can see that we don't see this simply translating across the sector. Now, obviously, there's implications for that. I think we all know that there are potentially cost implications as that flows through, but that's the business model that WestJet needs to work within, that obviously Air Canada is functioning within.
Michelle, I'm going to give the last word to you. You got about a minute. What are the political risks for the government if they choose not to intervene, at least immediately?
Well, I think there's more of a risk intervening immediately than not. I think that you want to try and let the bargaining process work, to get both sides to the table and talking. Certainly in terms of potentially mediating in that's one thing, and then I guess there's always the other option of getting them legislated back to work. But I think that there, as we saw last time, I can't remember quite how long the Air Canada was out for before it kind of came back, but it was at least a week, I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I remember being one of those inconvenience past.
Sorry about that. I wanted to give you the last word, but I've run out of time. Thanks so much for this. Michelle Cadario, Rachel Siegel, and Andrew Thompson.